Number 6. A couple of years ago, I was living in a small 2-bedroomed apartment with just my small chihuahua and myself. For perspective, I was a 22-year-old female. Also, the apartment I lived at was more like a large house that was separated into 3 sections, so 3 different apartments. I only had one other neighbour living at these units, and he lived to my left. All the other units were vacant. I had never felt unsafe living there, until this incident. I left for work during the week at around 7:30 AM, and wouldn't return home until after 5 PM. I had a definite daily routine. While I was at work, I would leave my dog in the living room area so she could lounge on the couch. In this area, there were large sliding glass doors that led to the backyard. When I would take Honey, my dog, out to go potty, there was a large red fence that wrapped around my yard and separated it from my neighbours' yards on my left, right and behind. Besides my one fellow renter, there were a few houses that were occupied behind me. All of the people who lived around me seemed normal, and never made a lot of noise or caused any issues. So, one day, I went to work as usual. After work, I decided to go visit my friend for a while. When I was there, I had this feeling that I should wait before going home. So, I stayed a little longer than I had originally planned. When I got home, it was around 9 PM. I opened my door and called to Honey as I normally do. She would always run up to me and jump around in excitement. This time, however, I noticed she was in her cage that I kept open, and it contained her food and water bowls. I kept calling her name, but she never responded. I started feeling a sense of dread. I walked up to her cage, and I immediately realised she was dead. At first, I thought she died of some sort of natural cause. I then looked up and realised the door to the second bedroom was wide open. I always kept it closed, and I knew I hadn't opened it before work. It was at that moment I knew someone had been in my house. My blood ran cold, and I ran outside and stood there in shock for a minute. Wanting to hear a familiar voice, I called my dad, who was luckily in town right then, and advised me to call the cops. The cop arrived at the apartment and immediately began saying that the dog probably died of natural cause. However, I showed her where the back gate was, and it was wide open. Plus, there were several other clues that someone else had been there. She still didn't believe me, and wouldn't do anything else until we did an autopsy on Honey to show that she'd been killed. Fast forward a week later, and we get the autopsy results back. She had died of blunt force trauma to the head, and whoever did it to her had placed her back in the cage and covered her up to make it look like she'd been sleeping. Our best guess is that the person killed her because she wouldn't stop barking. When a detective was sent to the apartment, he asked around to all my neighbours, and no one had seen or heard anything. Also, the guy who lived beside me didn't have anyone break into his apartment, so I feel like whoever did this was looking for me. It's been 2 years since this incident, and the culprit was never caught. So, apartment creeper and dog killer? Let's not meet. Number 5. I live in a part of Glasgow in Scotland that isn't that nice. There's a lot of heroin addicts and alcoholics about. This happened to me last week. I'm an 18-year-old female. I live in a large block of flats, or apartments, with my mum. I was looking out of my window last week, sometime very early in the morning, around 7 AM. I was just about to get ready for work, but was just waking up, and I could see this man stood near my building. He was wearing a cream trench coat and had a briefcase. He honestly reminded me of Inspector Gadget. I noticed that he was spraying something all over his body and his head. Every 10 seconds or so, he would spray this kind of stuff all over him, which I thought was a little strange, but thought it was probably a smackhead, and continued getting ready for work. Around 8:30, I was ready for work, so I left the flat and took the lift. I didn't even check to see if the man was there. When I got outside, he was still there, spraying this stuff on himself, and looking dead on into the distance, not even blinking. I had a good look at him, and what he was spraying all over himself was windscreen de-icer. The stuff you spray on your car windows when it's icy. There were 2 more cans of it next to him on the floor. I thought, what the fuck, mate? But once again, I'm kind of used to seeing people doing strange things around where I live. So I just kind of walked past him and crossed the road to wait for my bus. Next to my bus stop, there is this huge space that I can only describe as a concrete wasteland. It's massive and full of shit like broken glass and burnt things. Anyways, I was waiting around 10 minutes and could still see the crazy guy across the road spraying himself. He suddenly turned around and started walking towards me. I pure shit myself. My guts felt like they were going to fall out of my ass. He marched right past me and stood around a metre behind me, sprayed himself once again, and then started to try and talk to me. He said, "Hen, come for a walk with me over there." I said no very abruptly. He said it again, but this time it sounded angrier. But I just told him to fuck off this time. He then screamed at me, and this was a very loud scream. "Come for a fucking walk with me now!" And he opened his coat as if he was about to get something out of it. I took off. I just started running like a madwoman, as it was dead around me. There was no one around, and I thought I was going to die. When I kept looking back as I was running away, he was stood there looking into the distance once again, spraying himself all over with de-icer. Clearly, he was not very well mentally, but de-icer guy, let's not meet again, please. Number 4. So, this happened to me several years ago. I was 14, I'm 17 now. And overall, in that cringy scene phase, I had a friend by the name of Grace. She was 14 as well, but a few months younger than me. She was with me when this happened, but really swears that in her opinion, it wasn't as scary. Me and Grace were walking down the block to her apartment, laughing at funny Facebook posts and not really paying attention to our surroundings. So when I bumped into this guy, it wasn't really a surprise. I looked up, said sorry politely, and walked around. It was weird, because he had just been standing there. There had been no momentum, as though he was stock still. Whatever. Me and Grace continued to laugh, and I thought nothing of it until a few minutes later, while me and Grace were sitting on the front porch of her apartment. The guy from earlier came up to us. I guess he'd hoped I didn't remember him or something, but I have a good memory of faces. I looked up, giving him that dirty look that only teenagers can give, and asked, "What?" in the dirtiest voice possible. I was getting really creepy vibes from him. He looked surprised at the tone of my voice, but didn't miss a beat. "I'm looking for the library. Do you know where it is?" Okay. This was weird. The library was down the block in the direction we'd came from, and the direction he'd gone. I figured maybe he didn't recognise it as the library, and gave a small sigh before pointing down the block. "It's down there." Even before I finished my sentence, he shook his head. "I'm terribly sorry, but I'm not good with directions. Do you want to get in my car and show me?" At this point, me and Grace were both getting up. Grace took out her keys, and I shook my head. "Sorry, but me and my friend have to go upstairs. It's almost time for lunch." I was feeling self-conscious now, because while Grace was wearing a cute sundress, I, in all my edgy glory, was wearing damaged denim shorts and a slightly revealing black top. I could practically feel him undressing me with his eyes. He looked disappointed, but sighed and nodded. "Okay." Grace and I decided not to tell our parents about this, as it would lead to needless worry, and they wouldn't allow us to go to the mall to see a movie we'd been dying to see. A few weeks later, the paper called my attention because of a familiar face. It was the guy from before. It looked like a police mugshot, and the headline read, "Man caught burying child in woods." It went on to say that his name was Gregory Fiechter, and that a couple of college kids who were exploring the woods by Dead Man's Tunnel, a popular hangout spot for potheads, ran into him burying some unlucky preteen. I felt sorry for the poor kid, but was relieved that it wasn't me. Who knows what could have happened if I and Grace were more naive. So, yeah. Gregory Fiechter? Yeah. Let's never meet again. Number 3. So, I was about 8 years old. I'm a female, and my neighbour was at my house. She was 9 years old. We were playing in my living room, and the front door was open. We had an old screen door, the kind that anyone can rip open easily. The screen was locked, thankfully. The doorbell rings, and my babysitter, who was a very small elderly lady, goes to see who it was. I follow, thinking maybe it was another friend in the neighbourhood. A man starts talking about his vacuum cleaner that he's selling. He was dressed in a suit and says he wants to come in and demonstrate the vacuum. My babysitter says that she isn't interested. The man grabs the screen door handle and tries to open the door. My sitter tells him to leave, and he starts saying, "Open the door now." "Let me in," he says, while shaking the door handle. She closes the front door, and we can still hear him talking from outside. She tells us to stay inside for a while. So we look out of the window to see if he is going to the other houses, but we could no longer see him anywhere. He may have just been a pushy salesman, but you don't try and open the door to someone's house. I'm just glad that the screen was locked. Number 2. So, I've posted here before, and unfortunately, while I was smart in my previous experience, apparently, that sense of preservation didn't follow me into my teen years. To be fair, this is long. Anyways, when I was about 16, my best friend, we'll call her C for privacy purposes, and I met a guy at the park one night, whom we ended up hanging out with for the summer and years to come. We'll call him Jay. Jay was a teen, and illegal, which is relevant only because the apartments he lived in were literally all illegals, with the exception of one white guy, who wasn't exactly a great guy himself. So, C and I had become accustomed to showing up at the apartments at all random times, and half the complex knew us as Jay's white girls. Nothing we took offence to, since the majority of the time we got there, we were given free drinks and bud just to chill with these guys, most of whom were older, but pretty chill. Until Caesar. This guy was 38 years old, easily 6 foot, and he was thin, wiry, but stronger than he looked. My first time meeting him was just past my 16th birthday, when we had invited Jay and his cousin to my mum's, while she was out for the day to drink beer and hang out. He gave Jay a ride, and when we came outside to say hi and bring the guys in, Caesar stood back, just grinning this creepy ass smile. That's when Jay said, "Hey, Harley Quinzel, he wants to fuck you since he gave us a ride, haha." I laughed too, like, what the fuck? No, I don't even know this guy, you guys are crazy. I thought it was a joke, but they kept persisting, and finally I got pissed and yelled, "Fuck you guys, I'm not a whore," and went back inside. Caesar got mad, started cussing, and finally got back into his car, slamming the door and peeling out. Obviously, not a great first impression. So, a couple of months later, during a school break, probably summertime since it was pretty easy to pull the flip on our parents, saying I was at C's house and she was staying at mine, we decided to head to the apartments. We went up to Jay's first, but he wasn't home, so we went to one of the other guys' places that we knew. Guess who lived there too? Yep, Caesar. I wanted to leave, but he told C and J that the other guys knew we were coming and went to the store, so to come in and chill till I got back. He motioned inside, introduced his friend, and mentioned a 30-pack. Of course, being dumbass teenagers we were, like, okay. And I figured since we had C's brother with us, whom we'll call A, we figured we had protection and we'd be fine. At first, everything was fine, but I kept getting creepy vibes and would catch Caesar staring at me. So I decided I didn't want to be drunk around this guy, and slowly sipped my one beer, while C and A tossed them back in no time. Caesar kept commenting on what a pretty girl I was, and looked at her hair and those nice breasts, and etc. I was wearing a short-cut jeans skirt and a super low-cut shirt, cause, to be honest, I hella digged Jay at the time. I kept getting more and more weirded out, so I finally said, fuck it, let's go and wait for Jay and the rest to come back later. Immediately, he got mad again and stormed off to the room calling me a bitch and a tease, and some other shit in Spanish that I didn't really understand. I got up to leave, and his friend, whose name I never got, or just don't remember, told us to calm down, and we could go to his other friend's apartment in the same complex to wait for Jay. Did I mention that teens are extremely stupid? We agreed, and went across the walkway to the other apartment. The men there were younger, and actually a lot of fun. I finally relaxed and ended up sharing some tequila with a guy who was closer to my age, like 18 or 19. And we were all taking pictures and just having a good time. A, who was supposed to be our protection and look out for us, got trashed and ended up using the bed in the other rooms to sleep in it for a bit. Everything was fine, but it was pushing 2 AM, and the guys wanted to get more alcohol before they stopped selling it. So they left us in their apartment and said they'd be right back. It was cool. They were nice, right? I decided to lay on the bed to talk to A to see if he was sobering up. He had been laying the traditional long way, so I lay crossway, on my stomach with my legs dangling over the bed and my arm stretched in front of me by his legs, trying to tap him to get him to respond. But he was out cold. Next thing I knew, the light was turned off and I heard the door shut. I didn't think anything of it, figuring the guys had come back and thought I was sleeping. That is, until I felt my arms being grabbed and held down, and somebody laying on top of me, using their legs to force mine apart. Next thing I knew, a hand was up my skirt, pushing, and when I tried to get up, I was pushed back down, and could only smell sour breath. Before I could scream, say or do anything, the door flies open, the lights turned on, and the guy jumps off of me. I turn around to see C standing in the doorway yelling, "What are you doing? Harley Quinzel, I need you now." She burst into the room to grab me, and when I looked up, guess who? Turns out Caesar had seen these guys leave, but without us, and came over to realise the door was unlocked. C saw him enter the room as she was coming out of the bathroom a few doors down, and bust in because she knew he was a creep. Just as he goes running out of the apartment, the other guys come back, see him running, see me crying and shaking, and put two and two together. Two of them, including the younger one I was talking to all night, chased him back to his, pounding on the door, screaming about killing him, and he better not come out, among other things. They finally come back, calm me down, and get the story. Younger guy wants to go back with a weapon, and I beg everyone to drop it. Finally, Jay and the guys were waiting on the comeback, but end up talking to Caesar first. They weren't actually aware we were coming, and the best part is, they blamed me for what he did, and then got mad that we were at somebody's apartment when we didn't know them. The fuck? I stopped hanging out with them shortly after, but I was never comfortable going near those apartments again. So, to Jay, Caesar, and all of the others, please let's not meet again, because next time, I might not have somebody watching my back. Number 1. When I was 14, I had a paper route. Occasionally, I would have to deliver newspapers to people who did not subscribe to the newspaper. One evening in the summer, I went to deliver the extra newspapers, and my mum wanted to come with. My route would just be a few blocks, so we rode our bikes, and the whole trip lasted maybe 10 to 15 minutes max. This was back when people weren't too worried about locking their doors. I remember we left our garage door open, which was really dumb. When we got back, I came in the door and saw our sliding door was open a little bit, which was not uncommon. However, our dog was barking like crazy. My mum walks down the hall and comes back with a panicked look on her face. She very seriously asked me if I'd been in her room. I tell her no. She tells me to go into my room and lock the door because someone had been in the house. I lock my door and grab the phone in case I heard something. I look out of my bedroom window, which faces the backyard, and I see my mum looking around. She comes back in and tells me to come into her room. On the floor, all of my dad's guns were laid out. They were usually in gun cases, but they were all out of the cases and laying in a row. He had about 5 guns. The guns were always hidden in the back of his closet. We were scared. My mum called my dad to come home from work, but I don't know why she didn't call the cops. My dad looked around, and of course, found nobody, and nothing was taken. My mum's purse was out on the kitchen table, and that had not been taken. My dad had not told anybody about his guns being hidden in the closet. How did somebody know we left? We had one creepy neighbour next door, which we didn't really suspect at the time. I am just glad we did not walk in before they left. There must have been more than one person, because my mum's room was in the back of the house. A second person must have been looking out of the window and saw us going back. That was many years ago, and we still talk about how scary it was. Well, anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like, share and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any stories of your own, which you would like to have shared, then please make sure to contact me. Link in the description. and you may be featured in a future video. Well, anyway, I hope to see you soon, and I'll speak to you later.